Hello, welcome. This is Tips for the Transition, the Career Roadmap podcast, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, your host and career coach for women who feel stuck. My vision is to create resources for them to navigate career and life challenges with more ease and grace, and to know that they're not alone. So each weekly conversation I have with inspiring women is intended to help women around the world become more confident, resilient, and brave as they navigate those career and life challenges. So if something strikes a chord while we're talking with my guest today, please take a look at the show notes below the video and you'll see all kinds of links that you can get in touch with either one of us. So let me ask you, what does success look like for you? Are you frantically running on that hamster wheel? Or are you living on autopilot, just going through the motions every day? You might even be wearing the overwork and the overwhelm and maybe the burnout as a badge of honor. So maybe it's time to redefine what success looks like for you. And there's someone I want you to meet because we're going to talk about that today. Laura Rubin calls herself a reformed hustle bunny. And I love that term. I've never heard it before, but it really describes, having been in corporate myself for many years, really describes how it can feel. She is also a joy seeker and a lover of life. But after years of riding the hustle train herself, she made the courageous decision to take her life back. Her journey has taken her from living by default to living by design. You may have heard that phrase before, but I want you really to hear it. She now encourages, empowers, and inspires other battle-weary corporate and entrepreneurial hustlers to unwind from the grind of overwork and burnout. And she gives them permission to free themselves from society's definition of success. Forget the hustle and start living life with more ease and grace and joy and flow. That sounds really good, doesn't it? So I know a lot of people who would like to know that secret. I think I wish I had known it back a few years ago. So we're going to pull the curtain back for you on this, and I'm going to introduce you to Laura as we call this episode Redefine Success and Take Back Your Life. Welcome, Laura. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Maria. I am so excited to be here and share this topic because as it is near and dear to my heart and yours as well, I'm sure.
Yes, and probably a lot of other people in the audience, especially the women. I work with women mostly. But let's first talk about it's kind of your backstory. Share a little bit about your experience as a hustle bunny.
You bet. It started with checking off all the boxes: college, career, marriage, children, uh, nice house, nice car, all of those things that we have been told are what we need or are the markers for success. And I just kept checking off those boxes and checking off those boxes. And I actually hit midlife and had all those things and realized that it really wasn't, it didn't light me up. It wasn't the satisfaction or fulfillment that I thought I was going to have. It's like I had all these things, and even to the point of feeling a little bit of shame and a little bit of guilt that this is what I thought I wanted, and it really wasn't. So at early 40s, I lost my job, and it was my opportunity to determine whether did I want to go back and continue doing what I was doing that was, I was surviving, or did I want to change and figure out what really made me tick and what really lit me up? And so I went on the journey. And I'll have to tell you, I'm still on that journey but I look at life as an adventure, as a way, like, with curiosity. I play more, but it took reaching that point of checking off all those boxes and then realizing, well, that wasn't what I expected it to be. And following, what I've been modeled by the society, by my parents, by my friends. And again, getting all of those things, getting all those external accolades and the external things that I thought were going to be success or mean that I had success. And I didn't feel it. I wasn't fulfilled.
Oh boy, I'm sitting here nodding. I understand that whole experience so well. So let's talk for a minute about this, society's
Mhm.
definition of success. Let's let's dig into that just a little bit, and let's talk about why why is that for so many not enough?
So I believe that society's definition of success all has to do with external items. It's the number, it's the title that you carry, it's the number in your bank account, it's the nice car that you drive, the beautiful house that you live in, the vacations that you take. That those are the markers that society uses to determine, whether you're a success. When internally you're a mess, you aren't happy, you aren't sure who you are, you don't, decisions that you make every day are difficult because you have no foundation from which to live from. And so I really believe that society's idea of success is all based on external validation and external markers.
Yeah, I think you're so right. It reminds me about a realization that I had some years ago, that I was living to someone else's expectations.
Exactly. Exactly. And we
And
get
then
sometimes from our parents, from what we've seen. What are we modeled? Are we modeled a different way? I certainly was not modeled in a different way.
right, right. And then feeling like we could do something different. So let's talk about how you define success now that you're no longer the hustle bunny that you were.
So for me, success is now, and you said it in my intro, living life by design. So I decide how I tick. So I went on the journey, like I talked about, and I'm still on that journey to determining what lights me up. Those are the things that I want to do. And if what lights me up is working a 20-hour work week, so I have 20 hours to spend with my family, playing, doing fun things, those are the things that I want to do. So it's about, for me, it was about determining what were my core values, what was really important to me that I had lost along the way or never really even discovered because I was so busy being on this hamster wheel, and then I'd get burned out. So then I'd go to autopilot, that I never really took the time to determine what my core values were. Once we have a base of core values, what's really important to us, every decision, every activity, every action that we make, our behaviors can all be based on those core values. And then we're making decisions that line up, that we are in alignment. And there's the joy. That brings the joy back to us.
Yeah, and what else it does is it makes those decisions really easy,
Hmm?
right? So when we are in when we know what our core values are, and those change and shift
Yes.
over the course of our lives. So when we get centered on what they are now, what we really care about now, and use those as the checklist
Hmm.
for against which we apply any decision or choice that we're thinking about, and they line up with those core values, then it makes that decision so easy.
Exactly. Exactly. And it makes life, there's the ease, there's the flow, there's the grace and the joy. Because I would venture to guess most everyone wants to live in ease and grace and flow and joy. And
It
it
sounds
is
beautiful,
possible.
doesn't it?
It does. I know
Yeah,
I want to live that way.
yeah, yeah. So let's let's talk about your first step. How would you advise someone to take that first step to redefining success for themselves?
The first thing that I always have my clients do is we start pausing. And I call it pause, Pause, activity. So what it's about is just slowing down and starting to pay attention to what's going on around in your life. And that could be as easy as your cup of coffee every morning. Instead of rushing in and picking it up and taking it in the car and driving to work with it, what about taking just a few moments to savor the smell, savor the taste, feel the mug, look at the mug that you have it in. Start paying attention and being mindful and pausing. And that doesn't mean, for the busy professional, the thought of pausing is like, there is no way I can stop. How about a minute? How about 2 minutes? How about what are you doing with your time as you're standing in line waiting for your coffee at Starbucks, if that's where you go, or in the drive-through, however you're doing it? What are you doing with that snippet of time? Are you going inward? Are you just enjoying the sounds and the sights around you? Those are the little snippets of time that we can take back. And when we start taking them back, they start become a habit. We start incorporating more of that into our life. Now we have space here and there to start determining and taking time for ourselves and determining what we like and what we don't like.
Yeah, it's all a choice, isn't it? We get to make those choices for ourselves. I love what you said. You called it positivity. I love that. I call it the power of the pause. I think
Correct.
it's really, really important that we are mindful that we are on a hamster wheel and we get to stop it. We have the power. We have the choice. So I
Correct.
that's so that's so important. I love that that's where you start and that's the first step. And there are so many first steps we can take. The pauses can happen throughout the day, right?
Correct. And it's also
Pausing,
one of the most difficult. It can be very difficult, but when you start becoming aware, that's why we start with a minute, just a minute. You
yes,
start becoming aware of the benefit of taking that pause, then you want to do it more.
exactly. And I'm thinking about some of the situations I was in my corporate career, running literally from meeting to meeting to meeting. That was when I was physically in an office.
Hmm.
Uh, and even now, where they're probably back to back virtually, just taking, even if it's 30 seconds, but a minute would be great, right? Just taking the pause to breathe, to to
Exactly.
to reset your mind for what just ended and now what's beginning. It's really
Correct.
important. I love that. I love that.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's our calendars. So start looking at your calendar.
Yes.
Can you give yourself 5 minutes between each meeting? Ultimately, can you give yourself a half an hour? Maybe that's
Yeah.
not feasible, but try 5 minutes, just enough, like you said, to recalibrate, to breathe, to get
Yeah.
up from your desk and walk around your office or your for just a minute. Take that time to recalibrate.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important. And the more we do it, the more we need it.
Correct.
And when we need something, we have a tendency to to give ourselves permission to do it, right? And when we recognize the power behind that, the benefit behind that, then we want to do it more.
Correct.
Yeah.
I agree 100%.
All right. I said already, I love the phrase living by design, not by default. Let's just dig into that a little bit. What does it mean? And I don't want to give away all your tips, but
That's
how do we live by design?
So, as I started with earlier, we talked about core values. Really, they are at the base, the foundation of, how you live by design. What do you like? What do you don't like? Who do you like? Who do you not like? Can you take an assessment of what's going on in your life and decide, what do you want more of? What do you want less of? Who do you want more of? Who do you want less of? Now, I understand in some of those situations, the who you don't have control over, but as you take back your life and set boundaries, you can control how you interact with those people. You have control of that situation. And so again, you're living by design. Obviously, there are certain situations that we don't have control over, but we certainly can have control over how we show up in those situations so that they're to a benefit to us and we're living in alignment. But it really boils down to the foundation of learning who we are, what makes us tick, and then walking in alignment and walking from that, making decisions from that place.
That just makes perfect sense. Figuring out who we are is the start, right? Figuring out how we want to show up. I love that you said that. And I love that you said it's not always a what, it's often a who.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to choose how much time and at what level of engagement we spend with the who's in our lives.
Correct. Agreed.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
also feel like when we are grounded and solid in who we are, we show up with those people in a different way than maybe we've shown up previously. So those interactions change a little bit. They're not as
Mhm.
charged, at least for myself, at least for the person that has made the change. You're not as reactive anymore. You have a different viewpoint and you're more solid in that foundation. And it can have an effect on how you're dealing with the people that may not be the people that you would like in your life, but you don't have a choice. They are a part of your life. You were I think of coworkers. You can't fire your coworkers,
Yeah.
obviously. So,
Right.
but when you show up in alignment with who you are, dealing with those coworkers become easier because you are solid in who you are, and the interactions become a little bit different because you're showing up differently.
That's right. And I think what we do is we teach when we do that well and we practice it and we do it well, we are then teaching others how we want to be treated
Correct.
when we show up in a way that respects them. We may not even like them. We may not even enjoy working with them, but we have to. We're on a team. And so we set our boundaries. You used that term before. We set our boundaries and decide how we're going to show up, and that models for them how we want to be treated.
Correct. And
Yeah.
sometimes when we complain, at least I find for myself, I'm going to speak from my experience. If I'm complaining about someone or a situation, oftentimes I'm allowing it to happen because a lack of boundaries, or I have not expressed how I would like to show up in this situation or be treated in this situation. So without boundaries and without understanding, how I want to how I want to work, live in that situation, I'm allowing all of those things to happen. So the nice thing is we have control over that. Like you said, we have a choice. We can step up and make the changes in our lives, which ultimately will make those interactions, those relationships, those situations better for us.
Yes, I totally agree. And something just occurred to me. When we start to unearth and unleash the real us, the real authentic person who's now showing up and demanding in some ways that we be treated a certain way, there's a change in that behavior, and some people are going to react badly to that. Now, I think about families can
Mhm.
and coworkers can react badly to bosses, can react badly because we are not who they thought we were. And that can create some friction as well.
That's
And we
correct.
have to stand solid in who we are and not apologize for it, and
Agreed.
not have their judgment cause self-doubt in us, and so much so that we begin to revert back to our old habits.
And I think sometimes it's nice in those situations, because they are going to happen, that you have
Yes.
that you have support, that you have someone that understands what you're going through, that you can lean on, whether that's a friend, a family member, a coach, whatever that is, so that you have a sounding board and someone to help you through, that situation. Because there will be times you dealing with a family member that doesn't understand, dealing with a coworker that liked you the way that you were, and you're making these great strides. The other thing is to invite them to come along with you. Now they may not,
And they
but
may not.
share with them what you're doing and why, and invite them to come along and do their own exploration and their own change.
That's a great idea, and you're right. They may not. They may feel threatened that you're changing and you're leaving them behind, maybe. The invitation to invite them to explore their own stuff is a good one, but they may not be able to do it by themselves. And having the support to stay grounded in who you have become, and to help others make that journey as well. It's always best to have the kind of support that you were talking about. All right, so I'm thinking again, putting myself back into the 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 hamster wheel days of my corporate career. Some women in our audience might be wondering how they can live by design, as we've described it here today, and still work in their maybe lucrative jobs,
Mhm.
the ones that maybe they need or they have cultivated over a period of time. What do you say to them?
I say it's all about bringing your real self to that position, because I agree with you 100%. I don't necessarily ask my clients to quit their 6 and 7 figure job. That in some cases is just not possible, and they can't. Now, later on down the road, they may decide that they can, but in the beginning, it's about, as we spoke earlier, it's about bringing your new self into the position that you're in. So now you're looking at things differently. Now you're making decisions differently based on the solid foundation that you're creating. Now you can maybe set those boundaries slowly, but you can start setting some boundaries, and you can start figuring out, how do I insert the new me in my existing job? What are the things that I can do? And you start making sure you're taking lunches. Maybe it's that simple, that you're taking breaks during the day, whatever that looks like. But and again, it's baby steps, always baby steps. You're not going to get from A to D without doing B and C, and you're going to crash and burn if you do. So always small steps.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If you try to do it too fast, too quickly, too abruptly, make too many big leaps,
Hmm.
that in and of itself can add to the overwhelm, and you can burn out from that too. So that you've just raised such a good point, that making small changes so that you don't feel like you have stepped into a foreign body
Right.
and you're not comfortable with it yet. Well, how will anybody else be comfortable with you if you're not comfortable with yourself? So taking those small steps is really important. So we've gotten to the part, Laura, that we end our every episode with. And it's why we call the show Tips for the Transition. And it's where I ask my guest to share their best tips with us, those tips and techniques, those practical strategies that we can take away from today and maybe start to implement and start living by design. So, what's your first one?
First one, I'm going to go back to what we talked about, the pause. You call it the power of the pause, which I absolutely love. I call it positivity. Start finding places in your day to stop for 30 seconds, a minute, and just take a deep breath and look around and start paying attention to what's going on around you. The smells, the sights. So many times executives are living from their shoulders up. They're living in their heads, their head space. They're all cerebral. Let's start dropping down into our body and experiencing all the senses. And just a minute at a time, even if you do it first thing in the morning with your cup of coffee or right before you go to bed, just go outside, go in nature, whatever that is, start with the pause. The next thing is to start simplify. I call it simplify to amplify. And that really is about figuring out who you are. You can simplify your life and all the noise that's going on by determining your core values, determining what lights you up, setting those boundaries. When your yes is a hell yes and your no is a hell no, and you know what those are and you're living between those boundaries. Another thing that I would encourage, I encourage my clients to do, encourage you to do, give yourself permission to play. When was the last time you played just for the fun of it? Not an organized sport like soccer or working out in the gym for an external, again, for an external validation or external, like losing weight or, winning the trophy or whatever that looks like. What about playing just to play? Swing on the swings, skip, just to really get back into that pure sense of joy just for the experience itself. And then we can start defining what is success. Ask yourself, what in the ideal life, in your ideal life, what would it look like? And what does success look like for that? And so after you determine that, what's the big vision? What are little small steps you can take toward that big decision? So we're going to pause. We're going to take some time to really determine who we are, because so oftentimes we've lost ourselves along the way and we don't know who we are. Then we're going to take that knowledge after we've explored and discovered, and we're going to start living a life that's simplified, that's by our design. We're going to add a little bit of play in there so that we can have some fun and bring the joy back and learn what it's like to live on the other side of the desk and incorporate our whole being, not just our head. And then at the end of the day, now we're living life by design and we've defined success on our terms.
Well, those were brilliant. Starting with the pause and then finding ways to simplify things. And then giving ourselves permission to feel that joy as we decide what it is that brings us joy. What does play look like for us? Yeah, I love that. And what that does then is it clears our head so that we can actually think clearly about how we want to redefine success and take back our lives.
That's exactly
I
right.
love it.
And it is a journey, and it's not going to happen overnight. And I'm still on the journey, but it becomes fun. It's an adventure. It's, life is your playground. Let's play curious. What is it? We lose our curiosity.
Yeah, that's so true. Living in our heads, as you said, above the shoulders, that happens a lot when we are on that hamster wheel, the treadmill, whatever it is that the whatever it is for you. And we, when we are in that space, we're living by default. We're just letting it all happen to us instead of us taking control over what we can control and allowing it to happen for us.
We live in reaction when we're living that way. We're
Yeah,
reacting to
we
everything
do.
instead of being ahead, being ahead of the ball, being ahead of the curve, and
Right.
being prepared. And here's the other thing and we've kind of touched on it. Success for everyone is different. My success is
Absolutely.
different than your success. And I wanted to point out also the nice car, the beautiful home, the lovely family, there is nothing wrong with that.
Right.
It's a beautiful picture. It's the energy that's behind it. What did it take to get to that? Did you sacrifice yourself? And you can keep all of those things. I'm just asking you to just tap back into joy, ease, flow, grace, and joy, like we talked about in the beginning of the show.
Yeah. Not always easy, but it's made easier when you work with someone who's done it before, someone who can guide you through it because they're ahead of you in that journey. And that guidance is so important. So, Laura, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. Those tips are pure gold. What I love about them is that they are very simple. And if we just try to do them in small stages, like you said, then they will be easy to implement. And the more often, because they're easy to implement, the more often you do that, then the habit forms. And that's when you can really start latching onto that vision of, of living by design. Love that. Thank you so much again for being with us.
You're welcome. I'm very passionate about this message. I'm very passionate for women to really get to live life to the fullest. And I think so
Yeah.
many of us have cut ourselves short. So I get excited about it. I get excited just watching these women light up and
Yeah.
realize that there's more to life. I'm sure you get the same. And
Yeah.
thank you for letting me share the message. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so glad that I was able to bring you here today because so many women just need to hear this. It's not hard. It just is, it takes intention and it takes the willingness. If you really want it, it's like anything else. If you really want it, you'll figure out a way to make it happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So, Laura, I know that some people are going to want to reach out to you directly. Please tell us the one best way.
Best way to find me is at www.lifewithlauramarie.com. And Marie is Marie.com.
Okay. And for those who are watching, there's a graphic at the bottom of the screen. All right. Laura, again, thank you so much for being here.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me. It was a joy.
Great. I love that you use that word all the time. Joy. That's a great thing to do. And I want to thank everyone else for joining us today, for watching and listening. I appreciate that you're a part of this community. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a comment or a review. And if there is a star rating where you're listening or watching, just click on one of the stars. We'd love to hear from you. And as I said at the top of the show, I love creating and sharing resources for women so that you get to live with more ease and grace. I use those terms. Laura uses those terms. That's what we deserve. So, if something in this episode has resonated with you and you would like to get a fresh perspective and continue the conversation, please look at the links that are below the video in the show notes. And you can reach out to Laura in a number of different ways, as well as to me. And I invite you to continue this conversation in my free Facebook group called the Career Transition Roadmap. And that link is below as well. So we'll meet again here next Wednesday at the same time, 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. You know what? I believe it is our time to thrive. So let's thrive together. Until next time, I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, turning transition into triumph.